roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you
PbtA.
Hello, everyone. This is Rob, and you're listening to Dungeon Master of None. On the other side of the country is my co-host, Matt. You there?
Howdy.
We also have a special guest today, our first guest appearance. We've got Michelle Nickolaisen. I'm sorry, I fucked up your name, Michelle. I'm just going to say Michelle, @_Shellshock, a friend of mine and a fellow GM. Her project is at Serendipity Pod,
www.serendipitypod.com.
Yes. Thank you, Matt, for deleting this later. An actual play set in a hack of... It's a little bit Dungeon World, a little bit of Apocalypse World, Michelle?
So...
Welcome to the show, Michelle.
Well, by the way,
also,
hello, Michelle. Why don't you introduce yourself after I'm done
talking? Asshole,
yeah,
Rob.
Sure, Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, I didn't know I was the first guest. That's exciting.
We're excited
so
about it.
My name is Michelle Nickolaisen, and this is one of my many projects. I am primarily a writer, but it's funny because I came to games in this sort of like really roundabout way where like I was not, as far as like tabletop RPGs go, I was not super interested in it, mostly because of like just like some gatekeepery experiences that I'd had, like really snobby stuff or just like super unwelcoming environments.
We talked about that, yeah.
Yeah.
We're familiar, for sure.
Yeah, but it's funny, it's really funny to me looking back that it took me this long to come around to it, because like my first experience with RPGs was like Chrono Cross when I was like 10 years old, and I was like, oh my god, this is amazing! And when I was a kid, I was like super into video game RPGs and like choose your own adventure stories and stuff. And I have a friend who's been playing, she mostly plays D&D 5th edition, but there's also the Star Wars Force and Destiny, I think. And she's like been trying, like for years, she was like, oh, well, if you want to get into game writing, like you should just look into writing for like tabletop RPGs. And I was like, no, I don't think so. And now she's like, I fucking told you. Wait, can I swear? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Please, it's often and frequently.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, she's like, I knew you would be into this. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Sorry, my bad.
We talk about this all the time. It's such an easy thing for people to get into, and it's really not, the barrier to entry really isn't that high, but there is a lot of gatekeeping and there is a lot of sort of cultural, I don't know, calcification around it that makes people intimidated or unlikely to play, which is why people like your friend who push to bring people into the hobby are so important.
Yeah.
Well, it's crazy to think about if there wasn't that calcification and gatekeeping. You know, we're in the middle of maybe an RPG tabletop renaissance right now. If there wasn't those attitudes and barriers to entry, could we have been in this renaissance for the last 20 years? Could this renaissance be 100 times bigger? It's a little tragic to think about all the
lost opportunities, all the players who didn't get to play. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's where, which I know is something we're going to talk about later, but I think that's where stuff like podcasts and streaming really come in, because my friend had been trying to get me into it for a while, and then it was like, I think I listened to pretty much like most people's first podcast. I listened to The Adventure Zone and Friends at the Table, and I was like, oh, and my friend had been telling me, but it's like, it's really hard to explain without showing. And
yeah,
like, you know, it doesn't make it, if you try and explain it, it doesn't really make any sense. But when I was listening to people, I'm like, oh, this is really cool. This is interactive storytelling. This is like something I'm super about, and all this like custom world building, which is my favorite thing about writing, because it's so much more fun and easy than trying to figure out character arcs that make sense.
Right. Michelle, you're very online. I don't know if you saw this, but Matt and I got in an argument with exactly this kind of gatekeeper who was specifically suggesting that people who get into the game because of streaming or because of actual plays are not real fans. Have you encountered this at all?
I have not, because I very carefully hang out with people who are not douchebags. I think I saw that on
wise.
It's a very, very good choice.
I think I saw some of that interaction on Twitter, because some of the I think I saw some of that on Twitter, because I think the DM from God's Fall, which is one of the podcasts that I listened to, was interacting with this conversation as well, because it's wild to me that that people are not okay with someone getting into it through podcasting or streaming, especially because it's so well suited to demonstrating the strengths of the game.
That's what
you can't explain D&D to people very easily, but if you just have an opportunity where people can watch it, then it all makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. And you can do that without having, like, you can, watch a stream or listen to a podcast or whatever without having, it's weird that, it's so bizarre that that there are certain people who are so resistant to, like, oh, if you find out about it through podcasting or through streaming, like, if that's how you get into it, then you're not, like, a real true player or a real true fan, because it's so well suited to demonstrating the strengths of it, and you also don't have to go anywhere. Like, that's a big part of it for me, having had like bad experiences in comic book shops or video game stores or game stores, like having had people be gross or super patronizing or whatever. It's like, oh, I can see what this is like without having to risk having one of those experiences again. All I have to do is like turn on my phone and put in headphones or like log on to Twitch or whatever, and I know what it's like, and now I can play it.
Yeah, I just can't imagine why you would want less people to play your game. That's been the weirdest thing about this gatekeeping, is it stopped D&D from growing for so many decades, and it's just the weirdest thing to me. The burst in interest and growth in the past few years has been so good for the hobby, and it blows my mind that anyone would want less people to play the game. Let's talk specifically, though, about... So you run something a little bit different than what Matt and I run. You run a hack of Powered by the Apocalypse.
And for our listeners who are not familiar, Apocalypse World is one of the most popular, more narrative storytelling type systems. It's by D. Vincent Baker, who has written a bunch of storytelling systems. And it's so flexible that there's been all of these different published settings, and it's super easy to hack, as Michelle was saying. So there's Masks, there's The Sprawl, there's City of Mists, there's Dungeon World, there's the original game Apocalypse World. And it's really conducive to telling stories where characters interact with each other and have a lot of cool backstory ties and things like that.
Michelle, tell us a little bit about the system of Serendipity City. Like we talked about briefly, it's a hack of you said Urban Shadows and The Sprawl, a couple of different Powered by the Apocalypse games.
Yeah, so the two main influences right now are Urban Shadows and The Sprawl. I've taken a lot of the actual mechanics from The Sprawl, but not all of them, because The Sprawl has like a very sort of regimented clock-based heist system, and we're playing, I've got some players who have either never played Powered by the Apocalypse games or who are like entirely new to RPGs at all. So I didn't want to overload them with too much right off the bat. So we're taking a lot of the stuff with that, and then a lot of like the character classes and mechanics from Urban Shadows. I think that over time we will probably wind up working in more Dungeon World, depending on how things play out with the larger campaign. But as of right now, it's mostly The Sprawl and Urban Shadows. And I stripped out the corruption mechanic from Urban Shadows, because the way that the corruption works in Urban Shadows is that there are a couple of other PbtA systems that have something similar to this. So in like Monster of the Week, you get 7 luck points or something like that, which you can use to automatically upgrade a score or a roll to a perfect score. And but after you use up those luck points, your character is doomed, which has like the repercussions in the game. I'm not sure how it works mechanically, since I haven't DM'd that yet. In Urban Shadows, there's kind of a similar-ish thing called corruption, except that after you use up all of your corruption points, your character becomes like an evil NPC, essentially. And so you use the corruption points. It's not a straight upgrade, but you can use them to like get access to powers that you would otherwise not have access to. And it was just a little, it's not quite my philosophy.
Right. We talked about this
gamey
in the prep for this episode, but it definitely presents a distinct sort of attitude toward the world. A very like, not everyone wants to play a Calvinist game. We're not all, doomed to fall. It's, there are other philosophies of how people are.
I'm surprised no one's made a hack of Apocalypse World that's Calvinism versus Arminianism or whatever.
Yeah, we should do that. Let's get real deep into the religious history minds.
The scene, 1572, Geneva, Switzerland.
Yeah.
Guess what? You're going to be hung.
Yeah, a very sort of grim and everyone is doomed to fall. We're all tortured, imperfect souls, and maybe not everybody is into that sort of ethos, like zeitgeist.
Yeah.
That's one thing you got to be wary of with storytelling systems in general, which we love, but they're not always simple, right? There's often a lot of actual mechanical crunch in there, but the great thing is you can cut out a lot of it and preserve everything that you love.
Right. Yeah. Actually, that's a good point. There's a reputation that like non-crunch systems, like not basically like non-D&D, are all lighter, or that their mechanics are like not as complicated. But that's not actually the case in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think that and I think that one of the things that working within more story-based system goes or causes, I don't know, but there's definitely like a sort of a relationship there where, since it's story-based, since it's more narrative-based, it's really like your philosophy as a creator is going to find its way. Like it's inherently going to tell a story because that's what it's built to do. And because of that, the mechanics of the game itself influence the kind of story it tells. And I think that you see this in D&D to some extent, but in something like Powered by the Apocalypse or like Urban Shadows, it's explicitly meant to be telling like this hyper-political, everyone is out to fuck everyone else over. You are like doomed. You're going to become corrupt over time, just by virtue of existing like in this corrupt place and being magical, like existing in this like dark, magical, political underworld. And I think that that could be interesting gameplay. In our case specifically, it's like, it's not the thing that I want to play because, like, frankly, if I want to feel like the world is falling down around me, all I have to do is turn on the TV.
We're trying to have
Twitter.
fun here. There's no reason to replicate. Yeah, I don't get
the actual
I've
hell
played
world?
a few grimdark worlds, and I boy, as things go on, I'm just like a lot less interested in playing or reading those books or playing in those games. I just why would you want to? Like, what's the appeal anymore? Yeah.
Because of the teens, man. The teens love dystopias.
The teens love the grimdark.
You know, I think something that I would like to see talked about a lot more is like mechanics as metaphor almost. Ooh. And in this case, there's like some not bad, but there's some metaphors that should definitely be unpacked because we specifically, several of our players are LGBTQ, myself included, and one of the things that we talked about in the world building episodes was the idea that like the magical underworld is not, you know, it's just basically ignored by mainstream society, and it's sort of like we directly compared it to like being closeted in the Bible Belt, especially like 5 or 10 years ago, like when I was growing up in the Bible Belt. And this sort of thing where like people are aware to some extent that it exists, but making yourself known as like a part of that community is essentially social death, as far as like the quote unquote normal world goes. So when we're like, you're working within those metaphors, like when we've explicitly laid that out as a comparison, and then there's this mechanic that's like, yeah, also, just by virtue of existing within this underworld, like, you're doomed to become evil over time. It's like, that's a little too close to
those are interesting things to explore in a game and in a narrative, but adding like numbers and mechanics to it can often be sort of too weird and icky. Matt and I talked about
your ostracization level is now 9.
Well, Matt and
Let's
I talked
gamify Orlando Patterson's now mostly discredited thesis on slavery.
Matt and I talked about a Kickstarter, Dragons Conquer America, where they had a literal intolerance mechanic that would like measure how like poorly you treated native people. It was really weird, and I'm like, okay, like let's talk about this in a game, sure, but maybe don't attach a number to it. That's a little strange.
Yeah, and I think that it's something like in a lot of my work, there's like definitely metaphors around like queerness and magic, and so I think that that's something that's worth exploring, but like, yeah, explicitly attaching this thing. And I also think that there's something there of like people, and not just related to like gender or sexuality, but people who are like put down by the system in various ways often have to make really hard choices and wind up getting viewed as ethically tainted along the way by other people who don't have to make those hard choices because the system is set up for them. So I think that there's like some interesting stuff to explore around that, but having it mechanized in such a way and having that sort of be like the inevitable, like the game is literally set up to force you into positions where you take corruption to get out of it. and then over time become inevitably more corrupt until like you're literally an evil villain. It's like this combination of like, this is something that's interesting to explore, but also kind of interplays with real world and specifically the metaphors that we set up in this game in like potentially kind of icky ways. And also I would actually be really interested in seeing something like that with like a redemption mechanic or something that I've thought of something that's almost the opposite, where, because of course, like, because I'm a crazy person, as I'm playing this, I'm like, what would my hack, like, if I was going to build a hack of PbtA to play Serendipity City with, what would it look like? So I've almost thought, like, I think that an interesting mechanic would be something almost on the complete other side, where instead of getting penalized to become more powerful, like, you, by having the backs of the other members in your crew, or by helping out people who are also downtrodden, like, you get bonuses that then unlock more things, or like maybe it helps you level up or something like that. Because one of the themes that I'm really interested in exploring is like found families and underdogs. And I think that it's much more interesting to tell stories about underdogs like sticking together instead of underdogs stabbing each other in the back. Because if you look at real life, like, that's like, there's definitely, you know, infighting and things like that, but there are also like marginalized groups banding together to stand up to a bigger group than them. And I think that that's much more interesting and a much more empowering
solidarity
story, and, like,
mechanic.
Solidarity mechanic. I like that.
Yes, exactly.
I'm actually going to
Solidarity mechanic, yeah.
I'm going to put that in the game.
Yes.
That's a great...
Secretary, take dictation. Just in, solidarity mechanic, $1 million idea.
$1 million idea.
Well, no, that's a great point about Powered by the Apocalypse, is it's so flexible that you can hack it and decide what. And that's a hard choice dungeon masters and world creators have to make, is what you want to mechanicize and what you don't. And it depends on your world.
Yeah. Even outside of the mechanics, like, I think that there's something to be said there for, like, the way that you DM, too. I was talking with one of my friends, and she was talking about how she played a game of D&D, and their DM was always getting mad at her because she would solve problems without violence. So, like, they would walk into it, the DM would have this encounter set up intending to have it be like a fight, and then this character, I don't remember what kind of character she was, but she would basically just like talk them out of it and be like, hey, there's a way to solve this without violence, and the DM would get really irritated. And I think that that's something that we should be thinking about, is like, are we telling our players that the only way to solve things is through violence? Are we, you know, why does it have to be that way? Which is, you know, something that comes up in Powered by the Apocalypse games. In the Sprawl, there's a personal directives mechanic that kind of overlaps interestingly with that too. Yeah,
there's a lot of cool things to steal from Powered by the Apocalypse, and I think it definitely forces you to, and this would be a thing that would fix your friend's awful game that she basically undermined in a really cool way, is that, yeah, it forces you as the dungeon master to prep situations, right, that can be approached in numerous different ways instead of a plot where players run into a thing, fight the thing, take the thing's stuff. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about this. This sort of leads us into me thinking about. Let's talk a little bit about the world that you've built for Serendipity City. We've referenced it a little bit. Matt and I both are big world builders, and we've spent a lot of time thinking about how to make more interesting and dynamic and worlds that you know are not just Tolkien pastiches. So what's going on with Serendipity City?
Yeah, so Serendipity City was kind of built by this interesting push and pull of like both stuff that I would really love to see more of, and like intentionally doing the opposite of things that annoy me.
So it's a great way to think about world building.
File.
Absolutely, yeah.
World building is really just a personal vendetta writ large. Like, these properties have wronged me by doing things that piss me off.
So some of that was that exactly like you said about the Tolkienian high fantasy, like a lot of especially the actual plays that I listen to, and I'm like, super into fantasy as a genre, and I think there's some really interesting stuff to be done there, especially around like exploring metaphors for the real world and fantasy and things like that, like we already talked about. But one thing that I noticed was that like so many actual play podcasts and game settings in general are designed for like high fantasy settings. Some of them, I have seen some that are designed for, like Blades in the Dark is sort of this cool industrial, there's like, you're in an industrialized city, and there's also mechanics for magic and things like that. So that's cool. And then, of course, there's things like your Shadowrun or the Sprawl that are set for, like, sort of future. So, yeah, so I wanted to do something, and I'm really interested in sort of the interplay of, like, magic and technology. It's something that's really interesting to me because of the background that I come from as a pagan. Because, obviously it's not, like, literal magic in the same way, but it's sort of like I see... I talk to, my friends who are pagan, and all of us are like sort of negotiating this interplay of magic and technology and like our spirituality and modern technology in our day-to-day lives. And so I'm really interested in that kind of thing. And I'm just like, I just really like the 20s aesthetic. And I think that it's sort of an interesting, this is set in like an alternate universe. So it's not like the literal 1920s, but I think that there's a lot of like really interesting stuff that went on in that era with like a lot of the things. Actually, this speaks volumes about public education, and at least in Missouri and America in general. But like a lot of the themes that I really like about cyberpunk, of like sticking it to the man and things like that, I started doing research on the 1920s for inspiration, and I'm like, holy shit, I did not learn about like the 20s was this huge time, at least in America. It was also a huge time like in other places too, where people were pushing back on like gender norms, and like people were openly gay and trans and bi, but there was also like anarchists like actively fighting against corrupt companies, and like I really did not realize the extent to like how bad a lot of these companies were. They were straight up like comic book villains.
They were hiring
wow,
thugs
like...
with guns to literally shoot people who were striking, and that was fine. That was everyone was like, okay, sure, that's a thing that companies can do.
Yeah, and like I didn't learn about that in school.
They don't tell you
like,
about that, especially in the South. They don't tell you about like the Union battles of the early.
Yeah, I was like, what the fuck? Like people were literally shooting down protesters in the streets because they were striking for like an 8-hour workday. This is insane. And it's a lot of, like, and it's stuff that I was, like, vaguely aware of, but even given my political leanings, did not really realize the true extent of until I started researching for, like, inspiration for this game. So I was like, wow, this is, like, if I said it then, I can have all of this stuff that I really like. I can have, like, the sticking it to the man. I can have the magic and, like, the growing technology and the sort of tension between those two sides of the city, and, like, exploring all of that against, this backdrop where, like, there are bigger things at play that the players don't necessarily know about yet, or that have like they are only starting to uncover.
Yeah, there's so many cool like factions in that time period, anarchists and socialists, and corporations and Pinkertons, and also like burgeoning fascists and things like that. It's like a real like ideological hotbed in the 20s, and yeah, it's a super interesting time period to explore, especially in like a high stakes, high conflict sort of.
And then you throw magic in.
Right. So Serendipity City is a urban fantasy with magic set in a 1920s that never was. Would you say it's diesel punk?
Yes.
You could in fact say that.
Other diesel punk properties include a Matt, you want to your
a certain board game masterpiece that no one but me plays anymore, called Crimson Skies.
You sell it short. It was also a short-lived video game that was very fun for
that's
PlayStation 1
that's
or something.
Right. It was for the Xbox One. Thank you. It was an Xbox One exclusive. One of the first games debuted on Xbox Live. But we're getting a little more off the point. Right. Tell us more about the world of Serendipity City.
Right. Zeppelins, gondolas, trains, some technology.
Yeah, so there's some technology, something that because another thing that I'm trying to do is take inspiration. Like, I don't want it to be like sort of an alt New York City. because that's like something that's I feel like that's also like a trope that we kind of see a lot. Alt New York City or alt London.
I've never encountered a steampunk property, let's say, set in London.
Oh no, never.
I feel like you're
way off base.
Yeah, so like the idea of one of the things that I had an idea for, which we haven't got to see on screen yet, is like gondolas as public transportation, like skylift gondolas. And so there's that. There's zeppelins. There's like a sacred grove in the middle of the city that's like this giant sort of Central Park-ish place that's also inspired by my friends who are living in Malaysia right now and who have like a high-rise apartment next to a jungle in the middle of the city. They had a whole problem with like monkeys breaking into apartments and stealing fruit.
Amazing.
So, yeah.
This world sounds really cool. I immediately want to play a wizard gondola salesman who's trying to get the poor part of town to install a new gondola track.
Gondola.
It's the way of the future.
Yeah.
Gondola.
I didn't have it. This may be like a big question, but I'm super interested also in the interaction between magic and technology, or possibly the union of the two. Do you see them as in conflict, or do they work together in your world?
I think that it's one of those things where, like, ideally they would be working together. So there are, to sort of show like a peek behind the curtain, I have sort of like three major, I don't know if arcs or campaigns is really the right word. Like, I've been thinking of them as seasons, but they will probably wind up being like 30 to 40 episodes per season, so there'll be some long ass seasons. But I have like sort of three major stages, or they might wind up being shorter than that, because again, it's not. I have like I have a beginning and like some markers along the way and an idea for where things are going, depending on what the players do, but it's not entirely in my control as to what happens. But yeah, so I have like probably about 3 seasons worth of material in this current setting, and then something that I want to do in the future is like jump forward 100 years.
Ooh, cool.
And see how the things that happened in this version affected the future. And so I think that kind of like will affect what happens, because what I think that it would be really interesting to explore a world in which they are working together in union. In this current setting, there's definitely some tension, because there are some groups that are magic users in this world, like the dwarves. There's sort of like an underground city underneath the actual city, like a network of caves. And there are, like, that's where the dwarves and some other magical people live. And they're sort of like these alchemist-y tinker type things. And so not all of this has been shown on screen yet, but my concept of this is that, like, a lot of the dwarves are super gung-ho about mixing magic and technology, and some of them are more reticent, and some of them are pushing the boundaries in ways that, like, most magic users would probably disagree with. But maybe the unethical corporations that are, you know, actively trying to squash down anarchist uprisings, like, they might be interested in this.
Very Shadowrun.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Yes, like whatever social stigma there is against magic, like, profit is always going to outweigh that. So.
Yeah, this is
nothing more adaptable than global capital.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Exactly.
And this is a great tip for DMs everywhere. If you're looking for where to set your next campaign, set it in the future of your last campaign. Rob, your last player character in one of my campaigns made a debut as an NPC, and the holy shit moment of everyone when they're like, wait, that's Rob's old character, and he's a positive energy lich guardian of an ancient temple now, was pretty cool.
Yeah, I had ideas to do this for one of my actually for the Thunder on the Steppe campaign. I had intended, if we revisited it, to do something in the future with your actions having an impact, and I still hope to revisit that someday. But Michelle, I hope you get to do it, because that's such a cool idea, and it's such like rewarding as a world builder to like extrapolate from events and try to figure out what's happened in the future. It's such like an interesting intellectual exercise.
Yeah, and there's a game that's sort of meant to, we might wind up having to modify it, because I think it's meant to show a world rebuilding after like an apocalyptic event, which could happen, but hopefully won't.
If the players fail.
So yeah, it's called The Quiet Year.
Ooh, yeah, that's great.
And that might be like something to look into for other DMs who kind of want to do this thing of like jumping forward. They played it in Friends at the Table, which is one of my big influences as like a DM and a podcaster. and I've also seen it played other places to interesting effect. But it's meant to show sort of like what happens like over some span of time. There's also one called Microscope, I think.
Yeah, where you
which is a similar concept.
This reminds me of a question that I wanted to ask you is, Matt and I talk about this all the time, is what are your inspirations or what gets your juices flowing? Where do you go when you want to like refill the tank when you're feeling burned out, or when you're like, I need ideas, I want to, I'm trying to like make my world more interesting. What's your go-to when you're trying to get back into it?
Yeah, I listen to a lot of actual play podcasts, like I mentioned. Like, definitely, probably my biggest influence as a DM would be like Friends at the Table. Austin Walker is he's super smart. All of the players are also really great. Like, it's just, I highly recommend listening to it. The audio is a little rough at first, but you can also start at the Counterweight, which is like the sort of cyberpunky season. There's also like, you can start at Marielda if you want something that's a little more like standard fantasy-ish, and then go back and listen to the first Tyron season. But he's super, super good, and he's really great at sort of like, he talks a lot about things like mechanics as metaphors, or like turning fantasy tropes on their heads. I don't think it's one of those things that it's impossible to say, because I listened to this a while ago. So I don't think that my whole philosophy of like, I'm going to note down specific things that annoy me and then do the opposite. I don't think that explicitly came from him, but there is like sort of a similar thing when they're doing the world building for their fantasy universe, where they specifically talk about how orcs are often like kind of cringy in standard fantasy, how it's like very clearly sort of a stand-in for like cultures of color, like these horrible, savage, violent
I built an
beasties.
entire campaign around my frustration with orcs. I know exactly what they're going through. Yeah,
and so they flipped it on their head, and they turned them into like Indiana Jones archaeologist librarians in this world.
That's super
which
cool.
I thought was really cool. Yeah, so they were like, hey, how can we like include some of these elements that are kind of cool but are often portrayed like really one note or cringily, and sort of like flip that around. So I thought that like, and that's kind of something that I've tried to do too. And then there's also like, as far as some of the more magical influences, like Avatar The Last Airbender, super into.
Hell yes.
Korra.
We're big fans.
Yeah.
Korra is just like such a dead ringer
yeah.
for this like technology magic.
It's not magic, it's bending.
Technology bending.
I will fight you.
I'm super, like I said before, I'm super interested in the theoretical interaction between magic and technology, and Korra does it in such an interesting way. There's like such like a cool.
And they even have like some of the same themes with like evil corporations and stuff. But I think, and even a lot of anime, like a lot of anime in general, since it's kind of removed from our cultural context, like, which I know Avatar is by American people, but like it's definitely one of the only depictions I've seen in like American media of where they're doing like animism super well, with like the interplay in Korra between like the spirit world and the real world, or that episode in Avatar with the forest spirit,
the sad panda,
like the sad panda forest spirit. And it's also a really good depiction of like something that has like even come up a couple of times, because there's been, in this world that I'm building in Serendipity City, it's like there are non-human factions and like magical factions, and their ethical standards are not always going to align. So like that's already come up at least once in play, where this character was horrified by something the Fae were doing, and is like talking to a Fae character about it, and is like, but this is like evil, are you guys all okay with this? And this character is like, I don't know, like not all of us aren't okay with it, but it's also not something that's considered egregious enough against our code to like, and it's one of those things that it's really hard to explain, because it's like, have you read old fairy tales? They're not.
Yeah, they're really fucked up.
They're not nice. They're not the friendly type of fairy.
It's often, don't leave your village, peasants.
Yeah, exactly.
The world is scary
Stay out
and
of the
strange
woods.
and
There's
weird.
fairies
Consequences will be visited upon you. Yeah, that orange versus blue morality of the Fae is so much fun to work with as a DM.
Yeah, well, and it's like, and they're not, they aren't evil creatures either, but it's like, it's kind of like trying to explain to someone, it's like, well, like a tiger might eat a person, but that doesn't make it evil. It's just a tiger doing what tigers do. A tiger might also like, but we have videos both of like lions mauling people and of lions like pack bonding with humans. Like you don't know what they're gonna do. They're
not-
fucking
yeah.
lions, man. Like,
Oh man, it just reminds me of that it just crazy movie where all those people got mauled by lions.
Oh yeah.
The most frightening thing I've ever seen, because you know the actors on screen are actually getting mauled and hurt in the film. But this brings me back to Avatar: The Last Airbender, and I wrote a Mutants and Masterminds system for it, and now I'm thinking Powered by the Apocalypse base stuff would be much better. And I wonder, Michelle, since you've hacked various Powered by the Apocalypse systems together to give you something that works with you, is this something that one day we might see a published form of?
Oh yeah.
yeah, it's kind of something that I've thought about. Just because, like, I can't remember if I said this earlier. It's something that I've thought about. It would not like immediately on the horizon, but I think that there is kind of like a hole as far as more modern day urban fantasy in the role-playing system in general. There's somebody working on Blades in the Dark hack that sounds really cool, which I cannot remember the name of, and I will send you the name of later, which is like explicitly meant to be, I think it's actually an alt 1920s thing. I was a little mad when I found it because I just found it like last week. Oh, I found it last week and I was like, fuck, if I knew this existed, like even though it's in beta, we could be playing this right now. Like it's so perfect for what we're doing. But yeah,
I've long wanted to, and I've been working sporadically off and on because I love and hate Harry Potter as most people do, and I've often thought the more interesting system would be, instead of the wizards that get sent to an exclusive private school, the wizards here in America that have to go to a regular kind of shitty public school. Underfunded magic public school, and the Ivy League wizards are always being assholes.
I like
to
this
them.
already.
There's, I think, a great Powered by the Apocalypse game there.
yeah, I think it would be really interesting to take something that allows for like magic in a more modern day context, but also is coming from an explicitly like non-Christian background, which I don't say with any animosity, but just like as someone who, you know, I've been pagan more of my life than not, like it's super obvious where it sneaks in. Like in Urban Shadows, there's a class called the Tainted, which again with the like doomed commentary, and it's basically like, yeah, like,
Boom,
and it's like
Mr.
you sold
Taint,
your
the Tainted character. All right,
Sorry,
you
the Tainted.
sold your soul to a demon. You sold your soul to a demon to like get power or magic or something. And because of that, like, there's definitely a lot of, like, and it's very literally, like, a demon, like, Judeo-Christian demon. And so in our world, I was like, okay, well, what if the demons are more like chaotic demigods or something? Like, what if we're going back to the original demon with an A, like Greek and Sumerian meaning of the word, where it was literally just, like, a powerful spirit? I think that that's a lot more interesting, and it gets away from, like, some of these tropes that don't really jive with the world that I'm building or like my personal beliefs. So I think it would be interesting to build a system that has all of that and also like takes into account I can't remember if we were talking about this before we started recording or if it's on the recording, but I think it would be really interesting to build something that takes into account like redemption, but also like actively because the themes that I'm interested in are like found family and underdogs, and I think it would be really, really interesting to build a system that like actively encourages that dynamic instead of encouraging you to like try and screw everyone over at the first chance you get.
Yes, the
solidarity
mechanic.
Mechanic.
The patented
As I
right
said
now,
that, I
yeah,
was
solidarity
like, no,
mechanic.
there's-
Help each other out.
In D&D, if you're a paladin and you fall, there's usually some sort of method that you can redeem yourself, which I always thought was really interesting. But the method for falling, or the consequences for falling in D&D are so incredibly punishing. I can't imagine why anyone would ever want to continue playing a character. But I always thought about, like you were saying about a redemption mechanic, it would be so cool if that were built into sort of like a little bit less of like a punishing way, a way to, you know, a way within the game, sort of
redemption as a reward and not a punishment.
Organically restore your virtue, or, you know, challenge the corruption that has come upon you. I haven't seen any great games that model it well, but it would be super interesting to have a game that did.
Yeah, and your game sounds super cool, getting away from those sort of tropes of urban fantasy. I think of the urban fantasy that I've read, like the Charlene Harris Sookie Stackhouse mysteries or the Dresden Files, and there's always Christian things in addition to the Fae or whatever.
Yeah.
There's always angels and demons and fallen angels and sexy angels and fallen
sexy angels, sexy devils, sexy Fae.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, everything's got
exactly. And and it's nothing against it. It's just like it's also it's hard to like work in the kind of world that I want to work in when like you're operating sort of with that background. Like where do like dryads come in, or like very morally gray fae, or like morally chaotic? I don't even know like how you would try and describe
it's
that.
really hard. We're all all of us in the West are sort of raised, and it's it's like you're a fish and you don't notice the water that you're swimming in, but that we're all raised in this sort of Manichaean worldview where there's either good and evil and everything is aligned one way or another, and it's really it's difficult to break away from that, and I think that's why it's
all right. Slow your roll there, Franz Fanon.
yeah, I think it's great to try, and I think it would be super cool to have more properties written from an explicitly pagan or animist or any sort of non-Judeo-Christian worldview, and we run into this in history a lot. Not to get way off topic, but there's a built-in set of assumptions that you don't even notice until you start to step back and think about it.
I was beaming in his beamer, just beaming. Can't believe that I caught my man cheating. So I found another way to make him pay for it all. So I went to Neiman Marcus on a shopping spree. And on the way I grabbed Soleil and Mia. And as the cash box rang, I threw everything away.
So Michelle, as a master of these more storytelling games like Powered by the Apocalypse, a lot of our listeners play D&D or D&D 5th edition, but I think there's a lot that you can learn as a dungeon master from these types of games.
Yeah, I think that for anyone who was looking for stuff to incorporate without having to do like a whole hack, because like while it's fairly easy to sort of smush two PbtA systems together, it would be like a new kind of hell to try and smush D&D and PbtA together, I would think. And somebody already did that, and it's called Dungeon World, so you should. Yeah, I think that two of the things that people should look at the most are the like sort of the links mechanic is what it's called in. I believe it's what it's called in the Sprawl.
It's called
which is
History
where,
or
like,
HX in Apocalypse World.
Yeah, and so that's basically deciding ahead of time, like while you're building your characters, how they interacted previous to the start of this campaign. So like they did these jobs together, it went well or it went badly. Because of that, they have like +2 links or -1 link, depending on how that went. And so that gives you like a number for how well these two characters are bonded, which is something interesting to play with. But it also makes it a lot easier to assist someone, because like when you're rolling to assist someone in these systems, it's like 2d6 plus whatever your links are. So if you have one of our characters are like, or a pair of our characters are super close and they have like +4 links at this point. So if one of them wants to assist the other one, like it's almost a guaranteed success, which makes sense because that's a reflection of this past that they have together. And it's also a reflection of like, if you're trying to help someone physically or like comfort them or whatever, and you have like, it's going to be a lot easier for me to do that with my best friend of like 10 years versus, like one of you guys even. And like, so I think that that's something that people can incorporate, even if it's just like an advantage on an assist roll or something like that.
Yeah, no, it's super awesome, and I highly recommend that every dungeon master read in any of these systems the rules for making characters, because one of the most common complaints you hear from Dungeons and Dragons players is the players don't want to work together or can't find a common purpose and stuff like that. And if you just incorporate just a little bit of the rules for this in helping players make characters with this sort of shared past.
Oh my goodness, this is such...
Doesn't mean they have to be best friends, right? Doesn't mean they have to always like each other, right? But just that shared history makes things work so much better.
This is such a common complaint in D&D circles is, my players, they don't want to work together, they don't want to cooperate. One of them is always saying, well, my character wouldn't do that. And obviously that would never happen or almost never happen in a Powered by the Apocalypse game, because you're specifically building your character with relationships to other characters. And if I were going to do something, if I were going to be, advise sort of an advanced technique for DMs who are listening, feel free to just like gut the existing background system from 5th edition and then, put in something from Powered by the Apocalypse, something relationship based, and see how it works.
Yeah, I think, and another really, really good mechanic that I love is the personal directives, which I believe in Apocalypse World, I think it's like tags or something, and there's not anything like this in Urban Shadows, but in the Sprawl, there's like a list of personal directives that are sort of generally applicable, and then there's a specific list for each class. Since we're using the classes from Urban Shadows, we just went off the general list, but it's stuff like every time when you resolve a charged situation without violence, mark XP, or when you put money ahead of the mission, mark XP, or when you put investigating the disappearance of your brother, like fill in the blank, ahead of the mission, mark XP. And I think that's really, really good. It's really good on multiple levels because it gives, I think that especially with people who are new to tabletop RPGs, there's always this moment of like, people tend to either go into it and they have like this super, super, super fleshed out character, or they're like, I have a name and they're a rogue. Like, and that's it. Like, that's it. I don't know. Like this is like a half-elf rogue, named Melisandre, but I don't know who this character actually is. And so the personal directives is, it sort of gives you like guideposts as both as a player, but also as a DM. Because I think that something else that I'm really interested in is like, playing, which I think is just good DMing on one hand, but also like creating a more welcoming environment. I'm really interested in playing the kind of games that my players want to play. And so the personal directives are good for that, but it's also like a really clear signpost. There's a mechanic called, I can't remember who first wrote about this, but I've seen a thing called like X card where like at any point when something comes up that one of the players isn't okay with, they can play the X card and the DM just like, the scene is reset. It's not a big deal. It's really great for people who have like trauma in their past or, just like don't want to play a certain kind of game. And I think that a personal directives is like almost a more proactive way to build stuff like that in, because it's like, okay, so if this player said that they want me, this player says, that they will get XP when they resolve a situation that could become violent without it becoming violent, then I already know that this player is okay with me introducing potentially violent situations. Like, I know that that's not going to be an issue for them, and that that's the kind of game they want to play. And so I'm being like a conscientious, I'm being a good DM in multiple ways. Right.
This is something that Matt
this is what you don't want to do, but to what this is what you, the kind of situations you want to see.
This is something that Matt and I talk about all the time is and it's so great that Powered by the Apocalypse games encourage this, is having good communication with your players. And D&D doesn't mechanically encourage this any sort of way at all. You can have a really like transactional relationship with your players if you're a DM, if you're not putting effort into it. But what's cool about Powered by the Apocalypse is that it requires some sort of, in-depth conversation about like what type of game you want to play, what your characters and your players are interested in, what sort of themes and ideas they want to pursue. And that's definitely something, Dungeon Masters, that you should try to borrow from Powered by the Apocalypse for sure.
Yeah, and with that one, instead of having it be an XP mechanic, again, like that could be something as simple as when you're acting in accordance with this personal directive, like you get to roll with advantage, or something, just some way to sort of like incentivize it. I think
it's flipping that inspiration. Instead of you do something, here's a reward. If you do these specific things, and maybe you have a list of 3 or 4 once per session for each one, you get an advantage on a roll if you're, for example, breaking the rules when no one's watching, or putting the party ahead of your own personal goals, or something like that. Whatever traits you come up with.
Yeah, it's a really interesting mechanic. And I think another good thing, there was a really good Twitter thread I read, and he talked about, I think it was he making the thread, talked about like some specific systems. Like he talked about Powered by the Apocalypse, but he also talked about, I think, Blades, and I know something else. And something that he talked about that I thought was really good and was something that like all DMs could use. You might just have to adjust the way it works mechanically a little bit depending on which system, is the idea of like asking your players. So like in Powered by the Apocalypse, there's this idea of like, what do you do? What are you doing? What does that look like? Like constantly asking your players that. Yes, which is part of that sort of like scene setting and creating a narrative. And this guy who did the DM thread was talking about like the idea of like, what does that look like as another question that you could ask. So like when your character, when your player is like, is this person possessed? You can sort of turn that and be like, well, how do you know that this person is possessed? And, you know, depending on, like, the actual rules of that scene or that system, you might want to change it. I think in the system that he was talking about, there's, like, a lot of it is shaped by the character's worldview. So, like, just this person suspecting or deciding that this NPC is possessed could mean that she was possessed. But instead of just being like, yes, she's possessed, or, like, no, she's possessed, it's like, what do you see that makes you think that? And so then that gives your player a chance to like build the world with you and be like, oh, well, I see that like her eyes are red, and the last time I saw that was when I was dealing with an exorcism, and like her hands are shaking in this particular way that like reminds me of this other time. And so it gives your player a chance to like build the world and also their character backstory, and it creates like just a much richer visualization for everyone at the table.
Michelle, this is such a good point. I am going to repeat it, and some of the best advice for dungeon masters of any role-playing system is that whenever a player, you know, says that, well, I enter the dungeon, I make a perception check, I talk to the innkeeper, I make a diplomacy check, to just say, cool, what are you going to do? Or what do you do? Or what does that look like, right? Constantly ask your players, cool, what do you do when they speak in a more mechanical way? Or what does that look like? And slowly you will train your players to be more immersed in their characters, more immersed in the world, and building a cooler narrative for all of you.
Yeah, I definitely think it's not even tied to any mechanics, so it's so easy to put in.
Very cool. Michelle,
yeah.
I think we're running up on time. Thank you so much for coming and talking with us. We are absolutely going to have you back on for our absolutely, definitely, really going to happen Avatar episode, where we talk about how how great it is and how everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked.
Water.
But yeah, do you wanna plug your stuff right now? Let us know what you're working on.
Three podcasters lived in harmony.
If you liked what I was talking about today, you should definitely check out Serendipity City, which is everywhere podcasts are sold. We're at Serendipity Pod on Twitter and serendipitypod.com. You can follow me at _ Shellshock, which is CHELLESHOCK on Twitter. And I have like a pinned tweet with all of my projects. There's a planner, there's a novel series. The other podcast that I work on is called Unplaced. I'm writing the second season right now, and it's about a woman who wakes up one day to find that no one can see or hear her, and everyone is forgetting about her. And that's a scripted audio drama.
Awesome.
So you can find me all over the web because I perpetually take on too many projects.
Yeah, so...
Well, I mean, so you've got all that, plus the Avatar The Last Airbender system and adventure that we're all going to write.
That's right, we're all going to work on together, for real.
Plus that eventual hack, plus, like, the short stories. I have an idea for a choose-your-own-adventure text-based game, so...
So yeah, watch this space for more. But yeah, thanks again for coming on, and everyone, thanks for listening. Please, if you have questions for us... as always, you know where to write us. And thanks again for tuning in. We'll talk to you all next time.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Woo.
Take a little walk to the edge of town and go across the track where the viaduct looms like a bird of doom as it shifts and cracks. where secrets lie in the border fires and the humming wires. Yeah, man, you know you're never coming back. Past the square, past the bridge, past the mills, past the stacks. On a gathering storm comes a tall, handsome man in a dusty black coat with a red right hand.